A very good evening, all. So we are going to start the session. Myself, Jaizal, I'm the director for RedTeam Hacker Academy. We are here again with an interesting topic. As always, we used to host the community events for all our audience to share the knowledge, to get more insight from the subject matter expertise. Today, we are here with a very interesting topic, cloud security. For a long time in information security, when we talk about the cybersecurity also, we always curious to know or learn more into the cloud technologies. As we all know, the technology evolved from the perimeter to the cloud. And we, especially in our topics in offensive security, we talked a lot about the how to do the security assessment onto our cloud infrastructures, and also what kind of how the organizations implementing or enhancing the security of the cloud infrastructures. So today's topic is all about enhancing cloud security, best practices and emerging trends. Today we will be going to talk about our SME, talk about introduction to cloud security, encryption, access management, and major topics in cloud security. And we will have a lot of case studies and all. I would like to introduce our subject matter expertise for today, Sentil Velaytham. I really appreciate your effort, Sentil. It's your time. It's almost like very late, 11:30. Thank you so much for giving us your time and also share your insight and valuable insight to our audience. So for all the audience, Sentil, he is a very senior professional, almost like 20+ years of experience, and working right now as a staff cloud solution architect with the global giant company VMware. And he's talking to us from Sydney, and he's a cybersecurity speaker. And moreover, interestingly, he's also an assistant football coach. Would like to hear more from your end. Thank you so much, Sentil, for your time and your valuable contribution. We hope today's session will be a great success, having a bunch of takeaways from today's session. Thank you all for joining us today. Yeah, to you, Sentil.
Thanks, Jaizal. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm honored to be here as well, and I'm honored to be, sharing, whatever experiences I have, and then we'll go through the discussion, right? And in my line of work, I kind of speak to a fair bit of customers from different types of organizations, and primarily my role in VMware is around cloud adoption. So I speak to customers about their cloud journey, their cloud challenges, and also their hesitance in cloud adoption, right? So I'm here to walk you through on some of the topics around cloud security, its best practices, emerging trends in the cloud security itself. And we'll keep it interactive. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to answer them as best as possible, and we can go forward from there. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is the importance of cloud security in modern digital landscape? I guess we kind of can ask this question a little bit differently, right? We can ask this question in a different way by asking, what is the value of your organization's data to you as a customer? Now, if you ask that question to someone that's not IT savvy, they probably would answer nothing, right? For them, they don't realize the value. They don't see how the company's data has any value to them at all. To others that are more privy to what a company data constitutes, it's employee's name, the employee address, employee salary, intellectual property, data that's related to the industry's core functionality, they're probably going to give you an arbitrary number. But the question is more like, how long is a piece of string? The value that one could place on their organization's data varies differently based on the type of data, type of industry that the organization is, and the classification of the data. For example, in the case of Facebook, the average value of an active user's data to Facebook is about $2 per month. In another example, on July 2019, Equifax reached a settlement agreement with the Federal Trade Commission as a result of a data breach in 2017. The breach exposed names, birthdays, addresses, social security number, and etc. For those who have not heard about Equifax before, Equifax is an industry that primarily operates in the business-to-business sector, and they sell consumer credit score and insurance reports and data analytics to a range of industry that needs them. So these are your banks, security, social security, company that manages insurance policies, and etc. The breach was pretty substantive. Data over 147 million individuals were leaked. Equifax agreed to pay the Federal Trade Commission about 525 million in compensation. This means each individual would be entitled to a minimum payout of about $125. So far, those that are listening here in this webinar, and if you're from the United States, or if you have worked in the United States, or had any dealings with the United States, Equifax has actually set up a site where you can actually go and determine if you've been impacted. And if you are, you can actually file a claim to get a compensation. So there you go. Before we even start, you're already reaping the benefits of attending this webinar. What is the point I'm trying to make here, right? I guess you might be wondering about that already. The point is, there's an intrinsic value to your organization's data. Data has become a valuable asset for business and organizations in today's digital age. The intrinsic value of data comes from its potential to provide insights, drive decision-making, and enable innovation. And the value of data does not change as it moves from the cloud to your your on-prem environment to the cloud. In some cases, the value of the data becomes more. There's an actual science in being able to determine the value of personal data of every individual. Economists who study human behavior and decision-making processes frequently use a method that asks you two questions. Right? How much would you like to pay in order to obtain that item, as in the data? That's called the willingness to pay, or they call it WTP. The second question is, how much would you like to receive in exchange for the item that you possess? So they're asking someone else, how much would they pay for your data? So it's called willingness to accept, or WTA. Not wanting to be left out, the Financial Times has come up with an interactive calculator which helps to calculate the value of your individual data. If you have a board, you see the link down there, jump into the website link, and then you can determine how much your personal data is worth. Just don't need to be disappointed if the value doesn't stack up to what you've thought about your value is before. The value of data, hence, fueled the need to ensure security of the data, which gave rise to cloud security. Just because you have offloaded the data to another provider, it doesn't mean that you have passed on your responsibility of the data to the service provider. Those who have listened to my webinar in the past would have heard me speak about shared responsibility model. Ultimately, the customer is responsible for the security of the data in the cloud. Moving on. Cloud computing offers numerous benefits, such as scalability, flexibility, and cost savings. But it also comes with several challenges that organizations need to be aware of and manage effectively. In a recent survey done called the State of the Cloud Survey by Flexera in 2023, they examined the challenges that the customers face in the cloud technology. And as you can see, they've interviewed over 750 individuals who are responsible for making cloud-related decisions or are users of cloud services in a diverse range of organizations. The result of the survey provided a valuable insight, particularly regarding existing difficulties that the organizations are facing. The report listed these as top cloud challenges in both the enterprise and SME-based industry. The categories are managing cloud spend, security, lack of resources and expertise. These are expertise to manage the environment, governance, the ability to enforce governance in the cloud, compliance, managing software licenses, cloud migration, central cloud team, or the ability to balance the responsibility of the business unit that is consuming or managing the cloud, and managing multi-cloud. The outcomes of the report are not much of a surprise. Apart from managing cloud spend, because cost is always important, security and compliance continue to be one of the top challenges faced by the organization, regardless whether they are an enterprise organization or an SME. Peeling this further, let's zero in on the security and compliance challenges. These challenges on security are as varied as well, depending on the customer's exposure in the cloud. They could be about data breaches. The concern about data breaches is pretty justified. Relying on a third-party infrastructure, which are provided by the cloud providers to store sensitive corporate data, is going to make any CIOs, CTOs, and CISOs to be awake at night, worrying about unauthorized access and data breaches. And data loss. Cloud service provider is effectively running in an infrastructure that would have been very similar to how your traditional data center would have looked, although it would be on a much larger scale. Despite incorporating multiple availability zones and highly available infrastructure, there are still some small possibilities of these hardware experiencing failures due to technical reasons, due to humans who are managing them, or natural causes. I'm not sure how many of you here have managed Cisco routers or switches before. There is an actual error code on the system that could be generated as a result of cosmic radiation. This could be a solar flare from the sun. Data location and jurisdiction, right? Due to the decentralized nature of the cloud infrastructure, it could sometimes become an issue to determine where the data of a customer is stored, especially if the customer subscribes to a SaaS-based service. Data will be stored and replicated to the closest location where the customers are in order to provide a reliable service. For organizations that are sensitive about where the data is stored, this could be potentially a serious issue. Phishing and social engineering. Attackers might attempt to exploit cloud users through phishing and attacks and social engineering. Account hijacking, compromised user credentials can also lead to unauthorized access to cloud resources. Vendors lock in and lock out. Moving applications from data from one cloud provider to another or back to on-premises infrastructure can be complex and costly. Organizations might face challenges integrating cloud services from different providers if they are using proprietary technology. And the notion of cloud service providers going bust is also a very possible reality. Over the course of this discussion, let's review some of these concerns in depth. Data encryption techniques for cloud security. Encryption plays a crucial role in enhancing cloud security by protecting sensitive data from unauthorized access and breaches. While fundamentally, encryption technology forms the foundation of cloud security, the utilization of encryption in cloud environments can be overwhelming. Given the wide array of encryption methods, small, medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and even enterprise-level organizations may find encryption both as appealing and also confusing. Let's explore some of these concepts. Right? Data encryption at rest, data encryption in transit, transparent data encryption, homomorphic encryption, and also key management. So many different options. In all honesty, there's no single silver bullet option on what is the best option here when it comes to encryption. However, one best practice would be to use a combination of these approaches instead of just relying on one. That has always been my opinion. Right? Multiple combinations of this would work best instead of a customer just relying on a single option. Let's just start from the basics, right? Encryption involves the transformation of a data into a format that can be understood by authorized individuals. From a technical perspective, it's the conversion of an understandable plain text data into an incomprehensible text, known as ciphertext. In simpler words, encryption changes the readable information to appear as a random data. The process requires cryptographic key, which is a collection of mathematical values that are both the sender and the receiver of the encrypted message have mutually agreed previously. Essentially, there are two primary types of encryption: asymmetric encryption and symmetric encryption. In symmetric encryption, a single key is used by all parties involved for both encrypting and decrypting the data. In asymmetric encryption, or a public key encryption, one key is used for encryption and the other key is used for decryption. The decryption key is kept in private, hence private key, public key notion, right? And the encryption key is shared public, right? So hence the public key. Why encryption is important part of cloud security? By using encryption techniques, the organization ensures that there are no unauthorized individuals that is able to read the data while it's in transit, which is where it's being sent from the source to the destination, and also while the data is at rest, while the data is being stored in its destination. Essentially, the combination of encryption in transit and encryption at rest prevents anyone from intercepting or reading sensitive data that belongs to an organization. I'm sure by now you'll be able to gauge that symmetric encryption is faster, as it only uses a single key, while asymmetric encryption is more secure. There are also certain best practices in managing the keys. A simple rule of thumb is to ensure that the encryption keys are stored separately from where the data is stored. Why, you may ask? It's simple logic. If your user data ever gets compromised, and as you're storing the key where you keep your primary data, the key itself will be compromised. The second best practice is to regularly refresh the key. This can be done by enabling a refresh schedule. A lot of these new tools out there in the market have options where you can set up a schedule and then get the keys to be refreshed on that particular schedule. That way you rotate your keys and you ensure that if in case the key does get intercepted by somebody else, they will not be able to use the key to expose or cause issues in the environment because the keys have already been refreshed. The third best practice is to back up and also engage a third-party provider to manage your keys. This recommendation might not be suitable for some organizations that deal in a lot of sensitive or critical data, such as military data or data that's about scientific research and etc. There are several options out there in the market, such as Azure Key Vault, Azure Managed HSM, hardware security modules, or AWS key services and etc., which we'll explore later. A new and emerging encryption technique that is gaining traction in the market right now is homomorphic encryption. It came about as the tradition encryption technology requires the data to be decrypted before it can be read by the user. That means if the data is encrypted, it's useless. So for anyone to be able to use the data, they'll have to decrypt the data. That's the traditional way, right? Homomorphic encryption tries to overcome this challenge by bypassing the entire decryption process. This encryption technique allows the data to be read and used while it's still encrypted the entire time of its usage. Though it's still being perfected, this encryption technique, once it's tested and proved, because it's still being trialed now as it is now, it's being used, but it's still being trialed. It will bring out new positive changes in the cloud security. Because imagine, you never need to publish your keys out to your cloud service provider, or your external customers. Transparent data encryption, or TDE, is used by Microsoft, IBM, and Oracle to encrypt the database files. The encryption is done at the file level, which encrypts the database both on the storage media and also on the backup media. Some try to draw a comparison between this, the TDE, with BitLocker. Well, there is a bit of difference between BitLocker and TDE. With TDE, the transparent data encryption, the backups are also encrypted, regardless of the destination, versus BitLocker. If someone takes the backup to another location, the backup is not encrypted. While it's advisable to collaborate with cloud service providers for data encryption and key management, it's also important to recognize that the CSPs might not have the same level of commitment to safeguard your company's data as you, the business owner, does. In the event of a widely reported data breach, the clients and the media are likely to direct the criticism towards the company rather than the CSP. Cloud service providers aren't bound by the same data breach disclosure regulations that banks, federal agencies, and other similar entities adhere to. Additionally, the businesses that possess the data bears the accountability, even if the cloud hosting provider is the one or the source of the breach. The enterprise is ultimately responsible for safeguarding its data, regardless of how and where it's handled or stored. This is why it's crucial to establish security redundancies and have provisioned IT security personnel as part of the team as well. And that's where you guys come in, your certification, you being aware what's the latest trend in the security market really is valuable. Even though you're partnering with a CSP, cloud service provider, internal staffs should significantly contribute to the management and surveillance of the encrypted data. Let's go on. Let's look at access control and authorization in the cloud. Access control and authorization are two critical components of cybersecurity that work together to manage and regulate user access to the digital resources, systems, and data. While they are related concepts, they serve distinct roles in ensuring the security and integrity of information systems, regardless whether they are in the cloud or on-prem. Let's look at this further, right? Access control. What is access control? Access control refers to the framework of controlling and managing which user can interact with specific resources, systems, or data. It involves determining whether a user or an entity is allowed to access a particular resource and what actions they can perform once they gain access. Access control mechanisms are put in place to prevent unauthorized users from accessing sensitive information and to maintain the principle of least privilege, where users are granted only the minimum permission required to perform their routine and daily tasks. As such, the importance of access controls becomes more prevalent in the cloud. Users will never be able to physically access any infrastructure in the cloud. Imagine there's no concept of a hard disk or a server that you can physically touch and feel in the cloud. You guys are presented with the software orchestration layer, either as an end user or developers that are involved in designing or using the application. It's therefore important to implement access control for these cloud customers or users via authentication, authorization, and accountability. Let us review the various access control options that are available. Let's start with the discretionary access control, or in short, a DAC. DAC provides access rights depending upon the rules already set by the administrators. In this type of access control model, each resource has an owner or an admin that decides to whom to give the access and to what level. DAC decentralizes the entire security decision, allowing administrators and the resource owners to give access to users at specified levels. It uses ACLs, access control lists, which define at what level to give users permission to a particular resource. DAC is simple to use, and as long as users and roles are listed correctly, it's easy to access those resources. Since access control is decentralized, administrators or owners can easily add or remove permissions. Owners and users, depending on their privileges, can control access to their data, which gives them the ability to read, make changes, or delete files. Because of its simplicity and flexibility, DAC can pose a security risk to large organizations that is constantly handling sensitive data or data that's considered scientific as well. Assigning membership and assigning permissions to individual users is a time-consuming task, especially for large enterprises, and mistakes made by administrators by giving them improper permission can be detrimental when dealing with important or sensitive files. What about mandatory access control, or MAC? Mandatory access control is a method of limiting access to resources based on the sensitivity of the information that the resource contains and authorization of the users to access information with that level of sensitivity. You define the sensitivity of the resource by means of a security label. The security label is composed of a security level, and which ranges from 0 or more or different type of security categories. The security level indicates the level or the hierarchical classification of the information. For example, restricted, confidential, or internal. The security category defines the category or group to which the information belongs. Users can access only the information in the resource to which the security labels entitle them. If the user security label does not have enough authority, the user cannot access the information in the resource. In a MAC model, the access is controlled strictly by the administrator as well. The administrator sets all the permission. Users cannot set their own permissions, even if they own the object. Because of this, MAC systems are usually considered very secure. This is because of the centralized administration. Centralized administration makes it easy for the administrators to control who has access to what. The administrators does not have to worry about someone setting permissions improperly. Because of the high level of security in MAC systems are more often used in the government systems. To draw an example, any of you guys have seen Mission Impossible Part 1. It's kind of similar how the access control is made, right? So there's only one person that's able to access the computer. That one person is the one that's able to grant access to everybody else or retrieve that information. That's why they had to break into the vault. With that said, there are also some disadvantages to the MAC systems. The MAC systems can be quite cumbersome to manage. This is because the administrator must assign all permissions. Therefore, the administrator assumes the entire burden for configuration and also the maintenance. And the administrator can quickly become overwhelmed as the system grows larger and more complex. You must ensure that your administrative staff is resourced properly to handle the load. This is one of the main reasons the MAC systems are generally not used in an internet-based application. The larger user population would be very difficult to manage. The third role, the third control option, right? Role-based access control. You probably would have heard about this. It's, the short acronym for it is called RBAC. System administrators use the RBAC access control model to give access based on organization roles rather than considering a single user account within a company. Only people with roles that need to do a particular work are given access to the resource. With RBAC, administrators define roles and determine the resources that a role needs access to. Each user is then assigned to a role that gives them the appropriate permission to do the job. Users can join different groups, but they can be only given a role or one role. RBAC helps to reduce administrative work by enabling admins to assign user to a role with a predefined permission, as opposed to assigning each permission to a user one at a time. It provides an easy way for administrators to show that all the data and important information is handled accordingly to data confidentiality standards. It can be challenging for administrators to assign roles in large or growing organizations where roles may be regularly created or tailored to fit the needs of the organization. Admins need to maintain an up-to-date understanding of roles to properly maintain role categorization and manage the access requirements. This often requires collaboration between different teams to properly implement RBAC in the organization, which impacts the workload of other team members as well. Last but not least, the attribute-based access control, right? Or ABAC, the kind of called rule-based access control as well. So in contrast to the role-defined access control method in RBAC, ABAC is a complex strategy that applies a multitude of attributes to both users and resources. While it's more complicated than RBAC, it gives the admin the flexibility to make decisions according to the context and evolving levels of the risks. Users are only able to access resources that have corresponding attributes that can include demographics such as job, title, or security clearance, resource properties such as file types or creation date, even environmental characteristics such as access location or time. ABAC makes it possible for organizations to implement extremely granular yet flexible security policies that can be implemented across a wide range of resources. Not only does this make security policies adaptable to changing business requirements, it also keeps security tight with the ability to add and modify policies as the need arises. The granularity of the ABAC policies means that it takes significant time and resources to create and apply attributes to users and resources. Likewise, maintaining that level of detail is also challenging for admins of large or growing or dynamically changing teams. Now, let's look at what is authorization, right? Authorization is a subset of access control and focuses specifically on granting and denying permission to authenticated users or entities based on their roles and responsibilities. It defines what actions a user can perform and what resources they can access within a system. Authorization is usually enforced through policies and rules that are defined by administrators to ensure that the users adhere to the organization's security and operational requirements. Authorization involves determining whether the user has a right to perform a specific action on a specific resource, such as reading, writing, modifying, or even deleting the data. It prevents unauthorized users from gaining access to sensitive information and helps to maintain data integrity. In summary, access control encompasses the broader concept of managing user interactions with resources, while authorization specifically deals with granting or denying permission to perform certain actions within a system. So it's a subset of the access control. Together, they form the foundation of a secure information system by ensuring that only authorized users can access resources and perform appropriate actions. Organizations need to use access control method that best protects their confidential information for their needs. In some cases, it makes sense for the organization administrators to use a combination of access control methods to increase the security posture, as every type of access control method comes with its own benefit and also its own shortfalls. Now let us take a look at some of the most common identity and access management providers out there for the cloud. What is IAM? Identity and access management, right? Is the cloud's comprehensive framework that focuses solely on securely managing user identities and controlling the access to various cloud resources, native services offered by the cloud providers, and applications that are hosted in the organization's cloud tenancy. IAM ensures that only authorized individuals or entities can interact with specific cloud-based assets while adhering to the predefined policies that has been set by the security administrators. It plays a crucial role in maintaining security, compliance, and overall operational efficiency of the cloud environment. Some of the examples of IAM options from major cloud providers, right? They're quite extensive, but I've captured some of the ones that I think are pretty relevant, and probably you guys would have come across it as well. Azure AD, AWS Directory Service, Google Cloud IAM, IBM Cloud IAM, Oracle Identity Cloud Service, Okta, Ping Identity, One Login. What are the key aspects of IAM in the cloud, right? Let's explore that one by one. So, user identity management. You can split that into two, user provisioning and user authentication. User provisioning is automating the process of creating, updating, and deactivating user account in the cloud environment. User authentication, implementing various authentication methods such as passwords or multi-factor authentication and even biometric to verify user identities. The second key aspect of IAM, access control. Role-based access control, we discussed this earlier, by assigning specific roles to users that determine their permission and access to specific cloud resources. Attribute-based access control, defining access policies based on the attributes such as user attributes, resource attributes, or even environmental factors that is assigned to that particular resource. Single sign-on, SSO, allows users to access multiple cloud services and applications with a single set of login credentials, improving the overall user experience and reducing the need for multiple logins. Access policies and permissions, defining and enforcing policies that specify which users can access which resources and what actions can they perform once they've gained access. Setting fine-grained permissions that limit the scope of action that the users can take within a specified cloud services container. Federation and trust, enabling users from one organization to access resources in another organization's cloud environment through secure trust relationship. Identity lifecycle management, right? Managing the entire lifecycle of a user identity, right from the time that the user is onboarded to the organization to the point that the user is offboarded from the organization when the user departs the organization, to ensure that access is granted and revoked as needed, right? So the access is given when the user joined, and the user left the organization, the access is promptly revoked as well. Compliance and governance. Enforcing compliance with industry regulation and organizational policies by controlling access to sensitive data and maintaining proper audit trails. Cloud service integration, integrating IAM systems with various cloud services, application, and platforms to ensure a consistent and secure user experience. IAM solution offered by cloud providers often provide centralized dashboard and interfaces for the administrators to manage user identities, roles, permission, access policies across these cloud providers. They provide the ability for you to implement strong IAM practices in the cloud, which is crucial to prevent unauthorized access to allow you to protect the data of your organization and also to maintain the overall security posture of the cloud container. I also wanted to explore each of this IAM providers briefly. So without further ado, let's just start. So with Azure AD, Azure AD is a cloud-based identity and access management service that's provided by Microsoft. It offers features such as single sign-on, user and group management, role-based access control, conditional access policies, and integration with various Microsoft services. So if you're part of an organization that's using Microsoft 365, a lot of times they would have moved or decommissioned their on-prem Active Directory system and then moved it up to Azure AD. Some of the larger organizations that I work with, they use Azure AD as the secondary or replica copy, where they still rely on their primary virtual machine or an Azure AD for Active Directory server on-prem. So Azure AD is used as the sync option. And the way you access your Microsoft 365 resources as well will be through Azure AD. Amazon Web Services, again, it's a comprehensive service for managing identities and access in AWS. It provides features similar to what Azure has, user and group management, role-based access control. It also allows you to provide, it also provides fine-grained permissions, so ability to access the various native services that are being offered within Amazon. So you can grant user permission to a specific set of services as well. It also supports multi-factor authentication and also identity federation. Google Cloud, Google Cloud Identity and Access Management provides tools for controlling access to Google Cloud resources. It also offers role-based access control, hierarchical organization of resources, fine-grained permission, and it also supports integration with Google Workspace, formerly called G Suite. IBM Access Control, again, same control ability, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, but it also allows you to also provide integration to the other IAM systems. That's one of the unique features of IBM as well. So you can actually have IBM Cloud Identification, Identity and Access Management to integrate and connect with other cloud providers' Identity and Access Management tool. The Oracle Identity Cloud Services support single sign-on capabilities as well. It supports fine-grained user control, access control, single sign-on. It also supports integration with on-premise directories and also offers role-based access control. The other one is Okta. Okta is a SaaS-based IAM provider platform, which is native SaaS. It also provides single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, lifecycle management, and on-premise applications. So you can actually integrate and onboard certain applications in the Okta Cloud Console itself and allow your users to access specific applications through the cloud portal. So it also supports integration with various other cloud services providers and applications. So essentially, you could publish an Okta Okta portal and you can publish specific applications in there. So users can actually access those applications specifically instead of them requiring a physical machine. OneLogin offers similar. It offers an IAM-based platform that also includes a single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, access management, and also support for on-premise applications as well. These are some of the major ones that I've highlighted. There are obviously a lot more out there, but I'm sure that you guys would have come across at least one or two of this out there in the market. Let's move further. Threat detection and threat response in cloud environments, right? The statistics is pretty alarming. While 75% of the organizations believe that they are very or extremely prepared to mitigate an attack, 50% of them still fall victim to ransomware last year. This is based on the 2023 Global Ransomware Report that was recently published. Right. As organizations move from the on-prem environment, a key point to note is that the endpoint detection and response, or shortly called as EDR, is vastly different from the cloud detection and response, or what we call as CDR. The term EDR, as I've explained earlier, it's short for endpoint detection and response, is applied to contemporary solutions to safeguard the endpoints. These solutions have progressed from initial antivirus and endpoint protection software to what we call now as commercial offering that ensures ongoing monitoring and malware defense for endpoints, frequently incorporating behavior analysis and also machine learning. The term CDR denotes cloud detection and response. This term defines solutions aimed at revitalizing security operations and enhancing capabilities for detecting and responding to threats in the cloud environment. These environment encompasses identities, interactions among the services, containerized workloads, virtualized workloads. The emergence of this category is a direct result of enterprises increasing adoption of cloud services and its cloud infrastructure. Now you might ask, so do organizations that are currently moving to the cloud or in the cloud should worry about EDR, which is the endpoint detection and response? I'm not privy to an organization's security posture and its risk appetite, but if you ask what's my personal opinion on this, then I would say no, you shouldn't be abandoning your EDR. Organizations need to employ an integrated intelligence analytics and integrated reporting solution that combine both EDR and CDR. And I think that is the logical choice. Despite workloads moving to the cloud, users still access these services through laptops and mobile devices. Now, coming back to the statistics here, this was published by Fortinet. They recently conducted a survey involving 569 cybersecurity leaders and decision makers from organizations of varying sizes and industries worldwide. The aim was to gain insight of their perspective on ransomware, its impact to the organization, and the strategies they employ to mitigate their potential attacks. And this is where the threat detection and threat response comes into play. And as you can see, the statistics are quite alarming. Despite these apprehensions and a series of readiness, half of the survey
excuse me, I'm getting some messages. It's like no sound. Sounds very low.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay? How about you?
I'm okay. I mean, I can hear you well. Hi, audience. It's okay. Yes, can hear. Yeah, we can continue. Yeah.
Sure. So coming back to the point, right? So the statistics, based on the survey, 75% of the surveyed organizations believe they were very or extremely well equipped to defend against the breaches. But despite these apprehensions and sense of readiness, half of them surveyed are still experiencing ransomware incidents in the past year. The report also pointed out that nearly all the leaders surveyed expect an increase in the IT spend, focusing specifically on the security budget. Right? They want to invest in technology and services that will further safeguard the environment from further ransomware attacks. As a general trend, the primary focus of security leaders is directed towards adopting advanced technologies, particularly around artificial intelligence and machine learning, to facilitate faster detection of threats. Following this, there's also a significant emphasis on central monitoring to improve response efforts. More specifically, the Internet of Things security and the next generation firewalls have emerged as the leading areas and product earmarked for investment by these organizations. Notably, there is a surge in plans to implement solutions like endpoint detection, response, and also secure email gateway, signifying a proactive approach, given the fact that these are the main primary points of ingestion of ransomware in any organization. The strategic direction is actually quite well funded, given that the respondents identified phishing emails as the primary method employed by ransomware actors to infiltrate systems. Not forgetting as well that endpoints is the ultimate target for ransomware. I'm just going to have a quick sip of water. Sorry. I hope you guys are getting some new information as we move along. Let's get into the different types of or subdivisions, subtopics of threat detection and also threat response. I don't want to get into specifics about products or tools. Let's just review the overall concepts of threat detection and also threat response, right? These are critical components of maintaining security and integrity of data and services hosted in the cloud. The cloud environment presents unique challenges and opportunities for detecting and mitigating these security threats. Let's break it down a bit further. Threat detection. What is threat detection? Threat detection is a process that involves to continuously monitor cloud resources, its services, and the data to identify any suspicious or unauthorized activities that could indicate a security breach. Effective threat detection in the cloud environments involves the following approaches. The first one is behavioral analysis. It is the process of creating a baseline of a normal user and a system behavior and using machine learning to detect deviation from these patterns that might indicate malicious activity. Anomaly detection. Anomaly detection is a process of utilizing statistical analysis to identify anomalies in the user behavior or resource usage that could also indicate activities of security threats. An effective tool of anomaly detection would be one that is capable of identifying a baseline change rate and also a baseline entropy rate in the file system. Any deviation from the baseline should trigger an alert to notify the admins for further investigation. Network monitoring is the activity of monitoring network traffic within the cloud environment to identify unauthorized access attempts, data exfiltration, and also other malicious activity. Cloud native security tools, right? So that's critical. Cloud native security tools. Almost every cloud provider out there in the market have native cloud security tools. And why that's important, right? By leveraging the cloud providers' specific security tools that offer inbuilt threat detection features, such as AWS CloudTrail, Azure Security Center, and Google Cloud Security Command Center, you'll be able to leverage the inbuilt capability to detect the threat and vulnerabilities quicker, right? Traditional tools that are out there in the market are traditionally designed to monitor physical environment, and as such, they might not be suitable or adaptable enough to monitor the dynamic workloads of the cloud service provider. Hence, if the customer is able to combine cloud native security tools with the traditional security tools, in my opinion, that's the best way forward, because the cloud native security tool will be constantly updated to keep up to date with the latest bug fixes and also the latest feature releases of the native services provided by the cloud vendor. Log analysis and monitoring, that's also very critical, right? It's the ability to collect and to analyze logs from various cloud services and resources to identify abnormal patterns, unauthorized access attempts, or unusual activities. Threat response. Let's explore what threat response is. Threat response involves taking immediate action to mitigate the impact of a detected security threat and prevent further damage. In cloud environment, an effective threat response strategy includes the following steps. Automated response. It's very critical. Implementing automated response to known threats, such as isolating compromised instances, blocking suspicious IP addresses, and triggering alerts of these activities. Recent research has found something unique. Most of the attacks that happen in an environment is usually during long weekends or public holidays. By employing an automated response tool with the preset of actions to take, management and administrators can rest easy with the knowledge that they have automation in place for the environment to take action against any malicious or bad actors. Incident response plan. Developing a well-defined incident response plan that outlines roles, responsibilities, communication strategies, and actions to be taken in the event of a security incident. It's also important that the incident response plan is constantly tested and updated as a living document. As such, any flaws in the response process are identified early and rectified. Now, I want to recall a funny incident that the customer shared about incident response plan. So this is the customer that has created a response plan which utilizes a call tree mechanism in case of a DR and cyber attack. So employees were mandated to update their contact details on their directory system, and the contact details were exported as part of the call tree mechanism trace plan, right? The primary contact details were the office desk phone number, and they were only requested to verify the desk phone number when the call, because the call manager has a redirection in place. Plus, what they also had pushbacks, right, from the employees that, oh, we can't reveal personal numbers, hence data privacy rule and all that. So they did DR tests consistently, and every time they tested it, it was successful. Now, when they initiated the actual DR test, none of the critical employees in the calling tree were reachable since the call manager was down and the redirection did not work. Now, what happened here? Firstly, the call tree process was wrong, since as part of the call tree option, the rule mandates that you have to verify all three contact details: the home contact detail, the work contact detail, and also the mobile number. Secondly, in all their testings, they've never initiated a full DR test. If they have done so, they would have identified that they have a single point of failure, which is their call manager, which does the redirection when you actually call the desk phone. Are there any questions you guys want me to answer as well, or are we good so far for me to continue? See, there were some audiences that were raising hands as well. Jaizal, we good to go? Or do you want me to answer?
I think we can finally we can have a Q&A. That's better.
Sure. Yep. Great.
Thank you.
Isolation and quarantine. Right. Isolating compromised resources from the rest of the environment to prevent lateral movement and further compromise. See, the primary reason The primary way an attacker gains access to a system is that once they're in the system, they try to do a privilege elevation attack, and they do a lateral attack across a lateral movement within the organization. So once they gain access to a system, they try to see how they can compromise that and gain an elevation in terms of privilege, and then proceed in a lateral manner. It's important that the workloads that are recovered as part of the recovery process and the threat response process are placed in an isolated recovery environment. I've seen a lot of cases where customers go and they believe they've identified a good copy of the data, and they initiate a restore directly back to the production environment. And if the copy that they're recovering is clean, that's perfectly fine. But imagine if the copy that they're recovering is corrupted and contains that ransomware or the bug. Now you can further deteriorate your production environment and further compromise it as well. A smart tool, any smart tool out there, a third generation tool, would allow you to create an isolated recovery environment. It will also allow you to open external communication to the covered workload in a controlled manner. So I've seen a tool where it actually allows the customer to open inbound and outbound connectivity as well. Because a lot of times when you recover a workload, if it's in a dormant state, unless it has ability to talk to the external network, it will not show any abnormal behavior. So tools that is able to do or to control and open outbound, inbound connectivity would be really good. Forensics and analysis. Conducting thorough forensics to understand the scope of the breach, how it has occurred, and what data might be affected. Patch management, right? Absolutely critical. Ensuring that cloud resources are up to date with the latest patches and updates to minimize vulnerabilities. Communication and reporting. Communicating to relevant stakeholders within the organization, including the internal teams. If you're responsible to inform your customers, you should also do that. And you should also inform regulatory bodies as necessary. Post-incident review. Conducting a post-incident review to analyze the incident report, incident response process, identify areas for improvement, and update the incident response plan accordingly. Incorporating threat detection and response mechanism into cloud environments is essential for maintaining the security and resilience of digital assets. Organizations should adopt a proactive approach to security, leveraging both automated tools and human expertise to swiftly detect, respond to, and recover from security incidents. Data privacy, right? Enforcing data privacy, ensuring data privacy and compliance. Let's explore some of the topics. Ensuring data privacy and compliance in the cloud is a multifaceted endeavor, crucial for maintaining the integrity of sensitive information and adhering to regulatory standards. Here's an outline of key steps and considerations that you might need to take. Importantly, data classification and inventory. Identify and classify the data types that you want to handle, including personal identifiable information, financial data, healthcare records, and more. You need to maintain an updated inventory where this data resides in your cloud environment. Do also take note of the shared responsibility model. If your organization is responsible for managing PII information, it's ultimately your responsibility to ensure the safety of the data, regardless if the breach is caused by your cloud service provider. So data classification and inventory is very critical. Understand regulatory requirements, right? So familiarize yourself with the data protection laws and regulations that apply for your industry and geographic location, such as GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, CCPA, relatively new, California Consumer Privacy Act. If you're dealing with consumers from California, you need to be across this. SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, and cloud service provider selection. Choose the cloud service provider that aligns with the compliance needs and offers security measures to protect the data. A lot of times you need to be concerned about data sovereignty. So when I deal with Australia, a lot of customers here are concerned about data sovereignty. They're very cautious about where the data is living and where the data is stored. So if you're in a certain type of industry or certain type of country which is sensitive about data sovereignty, you need to ensure that the cloud service provider has a region in country. Data encryption, we covered data encryption a bit earlier. Data encryption forms the core part of compliance and data privacy as well. As the nature of the public cloud is shared, it's important that if there was ever a data spillage to another tenancy, rarely happens, but there has been cases, you have to make sure that the content is unreadable. And how you do that? It's through data encryption. Access control and authentication. Employ a robust access control mechanism to limit who can access and modify the data. Implement strong authentication methods such as multi-factor. Data retention and deletion. Establish policies for data retention periods and ensure that the data is deleted when it's no longer needed. Implement secure deletion methods to prevent data remnants as well. So if you're exiting a cloud service provider, you need to be across in how they eliminate or shred the data. Every single cloud provider has that policy, so it's important you review that as well before you subscribe to a cloud service provider. Regular audit and assessment. Conduct periodic audits to assess your cloud environment's compliance with relevant regulation. Vendor management. So if you're using third-party services or tools, you need to assess their compliance and ensure that they meet your privacy requirements as well, because these could be third-party vendors that are helping you to implement a project. So you might be sharing credentials. You might allow them to actually log into your environment during a pilot phase or a POC phase. So that's pretty critical how you manage that. I've seen customers that have a vendor account that's over 3 years old, and they no longer deal with the vendor since the last 3 years, but the last login date of that particular user account was about a few weeks ago. So you got to be really careful in how you manage that relationship. Employee training and awareness. So see, the human factor here is the most and the weakest link. So education and training awareness is critical. And I'm glad that you guys are here as well. So you need to educate yourself about data privacy and compliance best practices. You need to foster a culture of data security and privacy awareness within your organization as well. So by proactively implementing these strategies, organizations can maintain data privacy and meet compliance requirements in the cloud, safeguarding sensitive information and building trust with customers and partners. Now, what are the emerging trends in the cloud, right? So the cloud is always a constantly evolving environment. So I want to walk you through what are the cloud emerging trends. So zero trust architecture. Zero trust architecture is an approach that emphasizes the verifying identity of all users and devices, regardless of where they are, before granting access to the resources, right? It also minimizes the reliance on traditional parameter defenses and assumes that threats can originate from within the network itself. Zero trust architecture helps organizations prevent unauthorized access, contain breaches, and limit an attacker's lateral movement in the network. Secure access service edge, that's also pretty new. It combines network security and wide area networking capabilities into a single cloud-based service. Cloud native security, we talked about that earlier, about ability to integrate native security tools that is provided by this cloud providers. AI and machine learning for threat detection. So AI and machine learning are being harnessed for advanced threat detection and response nowadays. These technologies can analyze a large amount of data sets to identify patterns of abnormal behavior and potential security threats as well. A good AI tool is a tool that's capable of analyzing a combination of change rate and also data entropy rate. Serverless security. Serverless computing is gaining popularity. Containers, Kubernetes. So ability to secure those workloads is also critical. And how you secure those serverless infrastructure is also pretty important. And so there are a lot of organizations that I talk to, they're exploring new ways to protect those serverless environment. Multi-cloud, it's a new concept that's being explored. So no longer a customer is going to be sitting in one cloud. Every customer that I talk to now are looking at how do I create or how do I have the ability to move from one cloud to another? How do I de-risk myself? How do I not rely on a single cloud service provider? The other aspect of it is cloud native DevOps tools. So if you're in an organization that does a lot of DevOps, developing internal apps, you need to make sure that you follow a proper DevOps policy in building that app, because in the past there's been cases where the developers build a backdoor to gain access to the environment, to push in updates, to do feature updates, upgrades, and troubleshooting. So if you follow a proper DevOps process, that should not be there. Threat intelligence and sharing. Nowadays, organizations constantly share threats with service providers and also SaaS vendors as well. There's this, what they call as the bug bounty program. Believe it or not, Google has recently given out about $15,000 for a bug that was identified by its employee. Facebook has so far paid about $7.5 million in total under its bug bounty program. So there's a lot of sharing between customers and also the vendors as well. I wanted to quickly take give you guys an idea of some of the recent activities around where the data breaches has happened. So September 2018, Marriott division of the Starwood guest had about sensitive and personal information exposed, about 500,000 user data. 2019, over 530 million Facebook user data was also stolen and was posted in the dark web till April 2021. November 2019, an attack on Alibaba's shopping website, Taobao, caused a breach of almost 1.1 billion pieces of user data that are still lingering in the dark web. June 2020, personal details of almost 538 million users, including phone numbers of another 172 million users of Sina Web were also exposed. June 2021, the data of a firm, cyber analytics firm called Cognite were leaked. So it contained about 5 billion records of its customers. June 2021, more closer, 700 million LinkedIn profiles were exposed as it fell victim to data scrapping breach. In August 2021, Accenture was hit by hackers connected to Lockbit ransomware group. So they stole about 6 terabytes of data and demanded $50 million ransom. The biggest question is whether if Accenture paid that money. Well, that's not been confirmed or denied. So what does it tell us? It tells us that even the largest and most reputable organizations are not safe from these attacks. Now, we need to ensure that we safeguard the integrity of our organization. Hence, everyone should take cloud security seriously. Last but not least, I want to give you guys a good example as well. So, not just the bad ones. This is a good example of a customer that has enabled these control mechanisms to prevent or to recover from a ransomware cyber incident. So the customer has pre-configured a predefined action in their SOAR tool. So SOAR stands for Security Orchestration and Automation Response Tool, that is linked via API calls to their backup product. This backup product is also a SaaS-based offering, hence it didn't have any physical or on-prem footprint. Over the long weekend, an alert was triggered by their backup tool as it noticed unusual change rate that was combined with a high entropy rate. And based on the pre-configured rule that they have set up with the SOAR tool, it triggered an alert to the security team on the backup end as well. the backup automatically quarantined the previous day's snapshot that was done of that workload, and it started a new backup chain of the impacted workload from the date that the alert was triggered. No admins rushed to work on the weekend. They knew they had all the tools in place. So they started the work on Monday as usual. However, they've updated the users of that department that use the application that there is going to be a maintenance activity. And then they recovered the machine to a quarantine, from the quarantine snapshot to the isolated recovery environment. They then powered up the VM and stripped away all the third-party security apps that was installed on the VM. They then injected their own security tool as part of the ransomware recovery prevention option and started observing the VM for any abnormal activity. The administrators were also able to control inbound and outbound network connectivity because they wanted to open and determine how the server behaves once it starts seeing external connection. Right? Often VMs remain dormant if they don't see an external connection. Once all the compliance checks and behavioral checks has been completed, the VM was powered off and the snapshot was recovered back to the production environment. Now, the tool is also pretty advanced that they were using. It is able to do a Delta-based recovery, which means that they don't need to recover the entire VM back on-prem. They just need to recover the data that is changed and merged with the original machine. So that's an example of a good use case of a customer that has enabled all the checks and balances, have employed good recovery practices and good ransomware recovery and threat detection practices as well to be able to recover from a cybersecurity incident. And we come to the end. So I think we've got about 10 minutes or half an hour, I'm not sure, but I'm open to any questions. Jaizal.
Yes, I think we have a couple of questions on the chat. It was based on your session on rule-based access control and role-based access control.
Sure.
Can you see the question?
So, yep, I can. Yep.
Yeah,
So does access control differ based on operating system, or do all operating system run all four types? So the access control option, right? It's more of how we want to enable it. It's a general concept, right? So it's across all operating system. It's how you want to control that, right? Role-based access, rule-based access, mandatory access control. It's more of how organizations enforce or apply that policy. So let's talk about mandatory access control. So in mandatory access control, there is a single user or probably one or two administrators that manage the data, and it's actually centralized, right? So the actual information or the sensitive information is a central location. The central administrator manages that permission, and they control who gets access to what. Versus DAC or role-based access control, it's quite decentralized. So you can use a role-based access role. So RBAC is pretty straightforward, right? And direct access control. So it's a little bit decentralized. So the administrator has to know where the resources are to be able to assign the right permission. So that's why it's also a bit complex as well. One guy still maintains it, but if he has given the permission to the wrong user, they might get access to the wrong to the information that they're not supposed to have access in the first place. And the part about how do you use these four types in the exact part, there's no preset rules or fixed rule on where you need to use them or when do you need to use them. It will really depend on your organization's security and risk appetite. But my preference is to use a combination of those, right? A lot of times when I talk to some customers, they might be using one. My opinion is, and the ones I've seen that does it well, use a combination of this based on the type of data or based on how sensitive the data is. Some real-time example. So that was the one where we talked about the movie, right? I'm not sure how many of you guys have watched Mission Impossible in the part 1, where they needed to get that information, which is the knock list, which contains the sensitive information about the entire organization. So as you've noticed that the data is stored on a central system, and there's just one administrator that's able to get access to the system, and he controls the dissemination and also the distribution of that information. So in that aspect, it comes back down to military, right? So, you know, military organizations, organizations that develop aircraft, Lockheed, Boeing, they kind of have that in place, right? So different department, if they're designing a military grade equipment, only certain individuals or certain admins have access to that particular information or across the board. They then assign specific privileges and access for specific engineers that will design, say, the wing aspect of the aircraft. They will have another set of team that does only the engine. So no one group talks to everybody. So in that aspect, the security of the data is secured. So even if one of them tries to release the data or steal the data, they do not have the complete picture. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, I think audience, you can raise your hands and I can unmute if you have any questions. Sentil, I have this question, like we see a lot of compliance coming up, or maybe the enforcement from the government or specific countries comes up with policy pertains like the data should be stored or processed in a certain boundaries. How you see it as an opportunity for uh, professionals, or maybe who is literally passionate about the cloud security? How will be their future? Their future will be the opportunity and also the kind of challenges here.
That's a great question, right? Because and that's the reason why the growth and the skills for security professionals is actually growing across the board, right? If you talk about Australia, if you talk about Europe, if you talk about the South African region as well, Africa as well, right? There is a boom in terms of security professionals, in terms of professionals with proper certification. Because a lot of times, if you were to look 20 years in the past when I started, you had security admins from different regions managing data of an organization that's far away somewhere else. The CISO could be somewhere in another foreign country, where the business is in another state. That has completely changed. Every single organization or every single country is now concerned about data sovereignty, is concerned about where the data is stored. So that's where GDPR comes in, CCPA comes in. They are concerned about how the security of the data, who has the control of the data, how the security systems needs to be designed, what should be the security posture of an organization, how should an organization manage its data, how what are the security controls that they need to put in place. And these knowledge and resources, they want it within the region, right? So they want it local. In that aspect, there is a huge demand for security professionals to be, so that they need to get trained, they need to have that knowledge, where it'll be really beneficial for them, because they'll be viewed as a valuable resource by the country, by the state, or by the organization as well.
Great. Another question on behalf of the audience. I think, do you have any recommended courses for advanced PT penetration test? I believe.
I'm not sure. Maybe Jaizal, you could probably advise. Yeah. Advanced. I think PT stands for penetration testing.
Penetration testing. Yes, we do have a program called Advanced Penetration Tester provided in Dubai region, which includes a portion of cloud security. We added recently one module into it. Yep. Sentil, how you see it's like into anyone planning for a career into the cloud security part? How you recommend their learning path should be? Yes.
I guess there's a couple of options. One is to familiarize yourself with the technology and the trends. So attending webinars like this will be really good. Second is to keep yourself across what's happening in the industry. Third, I think the most critical is to get the right certification, to get the proper training, right? Because you can go get a lot of information out there in the market, but proper training and certification is going to add that credential to your background, so that you'd be able to give the right advice. Anyone can give advice. We had to give the right advice based on what is out there in the market, and you need to follow because security is a very it's vast, right? Because in the past you had on-prem, now you have cloud, and then within cloud now you have serverless infrastructure. So those security construct changes according to the platform or the environment. So you need to have the right certification, the right knowledge, and also the right experience. So even after you get all this, if you're not in the role that's performing the core critical security roles, that's okay, but you got to keep learning, and then the opportunity will come.
Great. So Shahul, yes, we will be providing you the participation certificate. Any more questions? It's a cybersecurity consultant. Should one take another training on cloud security?
There are a bunch. I believe RedTeam also has a fair bit of courses out there, right? So definitely look into that. Cloud security is always an evolving subject. So apart from certification, you also need to be across what's going on in the cloud as well. So I'd suggest exploring not just one cloud, also looking at what the other cloud providers are doing will help you to understand where the cloud security is evolving. I think the key aspect in understanding cloud security is to be across the shared responsibility model. That sort of sets the pretext, right? When you have any conversation with any customers, that conversation of enlightening the customer of who owns the data, who owns the responsibility of the data, and where does the responsibility start and stop. There's a lot of confusion in that aspect. So it's pretty much like how we had the OSI layer. When you start up computer science in the past, you have to understand the OSI layer in and out. So I think understanding how the shared responsibility model works is a new way in terms of, for you to even build that construct of cloud security conversation.
Great. Adding to the point, it's like we have the vendor-based certifications, just like from the Google, GCP, AWS security specialty certifications. We do have BC Council, CCDE certification, CCSE certified cloud security engineer certification, and I believe it's like ISC to have this CCSP certification. One question, Sentil, is that retention, deletion, and provisioning, deprovisioning are same?
Well, they're a little bit different. So retention and deletion looks at a data itself. So for example, say you subscribe to a cloud service, right? And then you probably would have heard of cloud services where they have different tiers of storage. your EBS. So like take AWS, for example, your EBS, and then you have your you have your S3s, and then you have Glacier, and you have Glacier Deep Archive. You flip it on Azure, you have your primary storage, and you have your Azure blobs, and you have ability to tier off the data. Now, retention looks at your data retention policy, how long you're going to retain the data, and which tier you're going to retain the data, right? And once the retention is done, say, for example, you set a retention period of, say, 2 years, 3 years, 1 year, 1 month. What happens to the data after the retention period? How does that data get purged? So a lot of times it's just assumed that it's purged, but customers should actually review the cloud service agreement and understand how the shredding process happens as well. Now, it's not so critical if you're still a customer of that cloud service provider. The bigger question is if your organization deals with a lot with PII data or health data or financial data, what happens to the data once you move from the cloud service provider? What is the data shredding policy? How do they purge off the data? How are you able to confirm that the data purging has been done? So some of these vendors out there, they provide you with a certificate saying that the data will be retained for X number of period, and after that X number of period, the data will be purged, and they provide you with a certification saying that the data has been purged. The data purging, so if in the past, if it's a physical disk, you could just shred off the disk or you could smash the disk. The newer technology is, and I think the best way to do this is to write ones and zeros. So you zero out, you write random data on the disk itself, so you overwrite the data. So you kill off the master boot sector and you write ones and zeros back. So it completely shreds off the disk. And a provisioning and deprovisioning, that talks more about user accounts, tenancies, provisioning of resources. So completely different thing. So how do you provision? So how do you provision or create a new user? Once you've created a user, once the user leaves the organization, how do you deprovision, or how do you disable the account? Do you disable it? Do you delete it? Do you still keep it active? Or a resource or a service that you provide. You're providing a service to a customer. Once the customer is done with the service, once the customer leaves or no longer needs the service, how is the service deprovisioned? Because everything that runs in the cloud is cost. Now, we've seen customers that engage services for a services team to come in and clean up resources, because they've utilized that service. No one's keeping an audit. And when they look at the cloud bill, they get a cloud shock. So essentially the bill runs into millions. They need to get services, professional services or services to come in to review the system, understand the design of the system, and go through and determine, yep, these are all the services that you no longer need, but you're still getting billed for it. Now, most of the cloud service providers out there offer a reporting mechanism as well for you to be able to review what you're getting charged and how you're getting charged. So it's also important to review that. So that's how the provisioning and deprovisioning comes into play, because everything in cloud is money.
Great. Thanks, Sentil. One more question. I think, what are the latest trends in cloud security that we already discussed in the slide?
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll definitely share the slide, so maybe you could refer back to
that. Sure. For someone with network security or enterprise background who is willing to move to cybersecurity, which area or certification should we do? As the cybersecurity field is very huge, most of the people used to have a doubt on which area to select.
I take this in a different way, right? It comes back down to your objective. What are you after, right? If you're going there for passion, so you got to reflect and you got to do your self-reflection and understand, determine what do you want to do, right? So if security is your field, and then based on what I see now, cloud is the current trend, but it's always a big cycle. 10 years ago, it was decentralization, then it was centralization. Now it's cloud. Another 10 years, we don't know what's going to be. What's it going to be, right? So it comes back down to what do you want to do? So networking security is also critical. The new trend in the market, everybody's talking about network-based security, firewall-based security. So that's where the trend is coming, right? So you need to protect the network as well, because it's just not protecting the resources. So the security aspect is indeed huge. You could be a generalist, so you can go on overall. So if you're into management, you could look at managing policies. If you are a generalist, you could do generalist. But if you want to specialize in certain aspects, then you can choose some of the specific specialization that's available.
I think to your point, Naveen, I strongly believe that whenever you go for a career change or maybe upskilling, it's will be better if your past experience or exposure complement to your upcoming positions which you are looking at for cybersecurity, so especially into security operations, security engineering,